It was not a direct path by any means. It sort of fell into my lap. And, over the course of my undergrad, I realized if I had known in high school that this was a job option, I definitely would have picked a different major. I would not have gone into biochemistry. However, having said that, I don't feel like my choice of major has ever been a limitation. It's been relevant to lots of jobs that I've applied to. And within the food industry, there are lots and lots of diverse backgrounds. I work with people from all different walks of life and all different fields. And so one nice thing about the food industry is you shouldn't feel limited by what you're in school for.
Welcome to episode 4 of the FoodGrads podcast. I'm your host, Veronica, a molecular science graduate student and career partner with FoodGrads. On this episode, I interview Sonya Turvey, the Research and Development Packaging Project Lead at PepsiCo. PepsiCo, as you all must be familiar with, is a global business which have some of the big name brands under it, like Quaker, Tropicana, Gatorade, Frito-Lay, and Pepsi-Cola. But that's just a few to name. Sonya has such a cool job because she works specifically in the packaging development department for the Frito-Lay division. In this episode, we learn about Sonya's role in the company and what exactly a packaging project lead does. There's a lot that goes into designing a packaging for a product, so I'm sure that you'll learn a lot, just like I did. Sonya and I spent a lot of time talking about her career journey and how her co-op experience was while doing her biochemistry degree. Sonya strongly advocates for doing co-op during school, and she talks about how it changed her life and gave it direction. Another big focus of this episode is talking about informational interviews and networking. Sonya gives some great tips on how to land your first job out of school and how to get hired for a co-op position. There's a lot of good lessons in this episode that you can take if you're a student still in school and you're planning on taking co-op or considering it, or you're just trying to find your next co-op position. So I really think you'll enjoy this episode. So, on to the show. Hi, Sonya. Thank you so much for taking the time to come out on our podcast. We're pretty excited to have someone in your type of position come on here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk about, my whole experience with the food industry and kind of how I got into it. So excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
That's awesome. So I think we should just get right into talking about, for our audience, what you do. And could you tell me what your role is at PepsiCo and what do you do there?
Yeah, so I do packaging development for PepsiCo. I work in the Frito-Lay division. So kind of most of the brands that are in the chip aisle that you'll see in the grocery store, most of them are produced by Frito-Lay. Yeah, so I lead packaging projects from the R&D side. And so really the main thing that I do in that job, and it's kind of evolved in the time since I started, but right now I'm really just working on developing new bag sizes, case packs, and specs for display pallets. So, chips come in a bag. Those bags have to be shipped in a box. And so developing the specs for those are really what I do. So some of the kind of stuff that's involved with developing a piece of packaging for the chip bag, we need to figure out what material it's going to be made out of to make sure that, the product is protected and that has implications for shelf life. So that is part of it. And kind of similar to any type of product development role where, you make something in the lab and then you have to do a plant trial to make sure it will run properly on a large scale equipment. We do a similar sort of thing in packaging. So kind of starting with lab-based prototypes and then moving it into the plant setting and making sure that it will run on automated equipment as well. Yeah, and then kind of the last piece of that is making the specs and putting them into our system. And so at the beginning of my role in PepsiCo, I did a lot of spec writing for everything that we currently had. We were getting it into a new system. That involved really understanding a lot of the technical information about our packaging elements. So, what materials are they made of? What are the dimensions? That kind of thing. And then I also review packaging artwork to make sure everything is accurate before it goes to printing. And then finally, another piece of my job is doing lab coverage. So anytime our lab tech is on holidays, I'll do coverage in the lab. So that involves any of our lab scale samples, making those, whether it be for tastings or consumer acceptance trials, also making bag size mock-ups and shipping lots of samples all over to vendors and our cross-functional team members. And especially in the era of COVID, shipping is a big part of that job right now, just because everyone's working from home. So there's a lot of shipping involved with that as well. But yeah, so that's kind of the main two pieces. Packaging development is the bulk of my job, and then lab coverage kind of as needed.
Wow. So it sounds like there's a lot of variety in what you do to keep you thinking and on your toes.
There is. Yeah. I do really like that part of the job. It's a really nice bonus. And yeah, it keeps you can move from task to task, right? So you're never getting bored or stagnant, which is nice.
That's awesome. So with your role, it sounds as though you have more of a leadership role. If I'm not mistaken, I was curious, how much of your time is focused on like leading the project? How does that work with what you do?
Good question. So I'm not really leading people. I'm leading a project from the packaging perspective. So I kind of go by project lead. It's more just I'm the packaging representative from the R&D department who will kind of do the specific tasks in a project that are required to get a new package developed. So it involves a lot of collaborative work with others, not necessarily leading others, but taking ownership of the packaging parts of a project and seeing a project through to the end with my specific tasks.
Okay, so that makes a little more sense because I was a little confused about that because as soon as I see that term.
It's more just working on projects and working with others to drive the project through, and I'm responsible for the packaging pieces.
So I know that packaging is really something that, like you said, especially with COVID right now, I know people are definitely thinking about how they deal with packaging. And I was just curious, how do you stay on top of knowing where are good places to get information about packaging, or how would you even know where to start?
Oh, that's a good question. And I know, in the era of COVID, there's a lot of messages floating around that you're not really sure which ones are correct. I would say in terms of something like when it comes to, food safety or packaging safety, the research is going to be the best source that we have right now. And the interesting thing about being in this kind of era of global pandemic is it's something we haven't seen before, and we're still learning more and more every day. So I think the latest that I've heard is, food packaging is not a significant source of virus transmission. Like you're not going to catch it from, picking up a package in the grocery store and bringing it home. But yeah, that's a tough one. I like just really being cognizant of, is your source from like an academic kind of research-based background, or is it more, a link that you saw on social media or something that a politician is saying? You have to be more careful with those kinds of things.
That makes total sense. So it's good to hear that, you're using the academic world to gauge making these decisions. So I guess we could actually bridge the topic from there, because I know that with your background, you come from a biochemistry type background, at least with your schooling. So it really seems like packaging is kind of not in that same realm. So
you would be right.
yeah, so I wanted to know, when you first jumped into this career choice, what did you do to bridge that knowledge from the biochemistry to packaging?
Yeah, so a lot of my learning has been really hands-on. Like you said, I came from a biochem background. I had absolutely no experience in packaging at all. It is a really interesting field to be in, though, because there is so much hands-on learning. I learn a lot from our partners in operations who really know their equipment well and the plant side of it really well. Some of our technical experts who are based in the US have a really good understanding of packaging development as well, and also conversations with vendors. So the suppliers who make our corrugate and our film that the chips are packaged in. It's been a lot of hands-on learning. So I was kind of saying before, when I first started my job, I was doing a lot of spec writing and inputting specs into this new system. And that was a really good way to learn a lot about the more technical side, because I was doing digging for a lot of those details, whether it be talking to vendors or, packaging experts. So it was a lot of hands-on. And yeah, like I don't even know, I never came across a course while I was an undergrad that was only for packaging. But that's kind of one of the nice things about the food industry is, hands-on learning is valued there. Yeah, so really that's what it was for me. It was hands-on.
Definitely, that's something even I know when I went into QA and coming from a chemistry background, it was a lot of, like, when I started to work at we were dealing with peanuts where I'd worked. I know that I would just go out in the plant every day and like talk to everyone, and I would eat peanuts. Like, I would be like, how is this different from this peanut? And it was definitely a lot of hands-on learning. So
Yeah, and I find too, like when you're in university, you're in such an academic environment, right? And the stuff that you're learning can be so focused on such a tiny area of research, especially when you get into your upper years, at least in a science background like I have. When you get into your upper years, it's so focused on very specific parts of an area within a field, if that makes sense. And so, understanding packaging as a whole and how it's applied in the real world, I don't even know if in a science course you would really get into the everyday application, or if you'd be more in kind of those, in the weeds academic kind of frame of mind, if that makes sense.
no, it definitely does. I think it depends on what program you're in. If I'm not mistaken, I definitely know that the college courses, and depending on the university, I know Guelph has more hands-on type training, but I know for the more general sciences like the biochemistry and the chemistries, it's definitely more academic, like stuff. I'd be pressed to use atomic spectroscopy in that
every day.
field.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, like for me, I prefer the hands-on side of things anyways. Like by the time I got done with school, I was just so tired of the research and academic side. I really like the hands-on, and I wish I had more exposure to that within my schooling, because I think it's so valuable and it translates so well into the work world, which is really what you're looking to do when you go into post-secondary, right? Is eventually get to some sort of job.
Oh yeah, you're definitely right with that. But I just wanted to cycle back. For those who don't know, could you explain a little more what you mean by inputting specs?
Yeah. For R&D, a lot of we basically own specs, and specifications is essentially a map of all the information that you need to understand what a piece of packaging would be. And so it's going to have your dimensions, the material that the item is made out of. There's going to be lots of different things that go in there. And so when I started my job, we were just getting into a new program for our specs. And so I basically had to capture all of this information that needed to be inputted into the program, figure out what everything was for every packaging element that we have, and put it in. So it was sort of like data entry, but it was kind of like searching for, the information that you needed and understanding it, and then putting it into this kind of spec system. Does that make more sense?
Yes, that does. And I think that makes sense that it would be a big undertaking for a company of your size that you were going into.
Yes. Yeah. It took almost a year to get from start to finish, with 2 people working on it, to get every spec finally completed and in the system and up and running.
Well,
So
I think that was probably a great start for you because you were doing specs. You probably got a really good understanding of what your company does before you even started to touch the packaging.
yeah, for sure. It gave me such a good background. And now I've got that background information to make more educated decisions in project work. And, spec input is not the sexiest job out there, but it's really foundational and really helps you understand your company, your products, or in my case, your packages, and what all the information needs that when you're developing something new, you're going to have to define in your specification.
Wow. That's good. I mean, it's hearing at the time, I know doing data entry, it, like you said, it doesn't sound like the sexiest thing to do, but there's just so much value in taking what you don't even sometimes know what you're gaining in certain jobs that like roles that you're doing until you're like, oh, I could apply what I was doing like 6 months ago.
Yeah, exactly. And you're not going to get up to those more exciting sounding jobs until you have that really base knowledge that helps you get there and make bigger decisions when you're in those kind of bigger roles.
That's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
I also wanted to know, because again, we were talking about biochemistry, but I was more curious as well, because we never actually kind of dived into how did you decide to go into food? Like when did that transition occur?
Yeah. So I'm going to start back when I entered university, and I went to McMaster University, and at that school, your first year is very general. And then after your first year, you pick kind of what stream of science you want to specialize in. And I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do after school. I knew that I didn't want to be in school forever, and that was about it. So I thought, okay, biochem seems like a job where it could apply to lots of different fields. It's kind of got the biology and the chemistry, and it also had a co-op program. So I thought, sure, this sounds like a good idea. Honestly, like I didn't even really like fully understand what biochemistry entailed before I went into it. I was kind of looking more long range about, okay, what makes the most sense to go into. And so I knew I wanted to do co-op because I had no idea what job I wanted. And so at our school, we had to do this kind of co-op intro course just to sort of get you ready for the co-op program. And one of the things that the instructor said was, you know, maybe you don't know what job you want to do, but think about what field you want to work in. And I thought that was really cool because a lot of times as you're growing up, you know, you hear people, oh, I'm an engineer, I'm a doctor, and you hear about all these jobs, but if you don't want to do those kinds of jobs, you're sort of at odds. You don't really know what you might want to do. So she kind of listed off, you know, maybe you want to work in the cosmetic industry or in a hospital, or maybe you want to work in the food industry. And right away that piqued my interest. I was like, that's the only one that really kind of interests me out of that list you just gave. But that sounds really cool. I wonder what working in the food industry would involve. So that was sort of what piqued my interest. And then also in this co-op course, we were talking about informational interviews, which is kind of just a way to have a chat with someone who works in a job that you're interested in. You basically can ask them some questions about what their job is, almost like what we're doing here, what their job is, what their career path has looked like, what they like about their job, what they don't like about it, just to get some information for you to understand whether it's a job you might want to work towards. So that was the first time I'd heard about them. And so then I kind of had, okay, well, I want to work in the food industry. I probably should have do some informational interviews with people who do work in the food industry so I can kind of start to narrow down what I'd be interested in. And so that was fine, but I didn't really know how to go any further. Well, it kind of turned out, it was over reading week, and I was at home talking to like a distant family friend, and she was asking about how school is going. And I said, oh, you know, I'm hoping to get into the co-op program. I don't really know what I want to do, but I'm interested in the food industry. And she said, oh, I go to church with this lady who works in the food industry, and she's got a really cool job, and I could connect you if you want. So I thought, perfect, this is great. Maybe I could do an informational interview with her. And so she was a manager of product development. And so I ended up going and meeting with her, and she explained about her job, and I thought, this is the coolest thing ever. I've never even thought about this, but I definitely am interested in this type of job for after school. And had a really great connection with her. And then when I was looking for my first co-op job, reached back out, and they ended up having an opening as a product development co-op student. And so that kind of led to my first co-op job in the food industry. And I absolutely loved it. It was awesome. And I was like, yep, this is what I want to do. That was also when I took my first course in food science. Someone that I worked with at that company had taken the food science certificate through the University of Guelph. And I thought, why don't I take the first course, see if I like it? And I did. I loved it. So that was kind of, you know, the rest is history. From there, I just kept looking for other jobs within the food industry. I kept taking the food science courses. Yeah. So it was not a direct path by any means. It sort of fell into my lap. And, over the course of my undergrad, I realized if I had known in high school that this was a job option, I definitely would have picked a different major. I would not have gone into biochemistry. However, having said that, I don't feel like my choice of major has ever been a limitation. It's been relevant to lots of jobs that I've applied to. And within the food industry, there are lots and lots of diverse backgrounds. I work with people from all different walks of life and all different fields. And so one nice thing about the food industry is you shouldn't feel limited by what you're in school for. Yeah, but that's kind of a long-winded story, but that's how I got into the food industry myself.
No, that's perfect. I mean, there's so many little bits of knowledge that I'd want to like break down and all that. I know the first thing that comes to mind, you say that the position had fallen into your lap, but I mean, that there's anything from it. I mean, just getting the informational interviews, that is definitely a piece of advice that I give to a lot of people as well, because I mean, you just get to know. I mean, there's nothing wrong with knowing. At the worst case, you find out what you don't like. So
Exactly. And honestly, like, people love to talk about themselves. And so if you reach out to someone and you say, can you tell me about your job? I'd love to learn about it. No one's going to say no. Like, you have a coffee together for 20 minutes and you're right. It's more information that you can put in your back pocket and start to hone in on what types of jobs you really want to look for. And then from there, you can understand, what skills do I need? What experience might I want to get before I can move into that kind of stuff.
yeah, I know, that's for sure. I've noticed people do like to talk about themselves, but I mean, I can't complain. That's how I'm talking to you. But
Yeah, it's how you learn, right? So,
but I have to laugh at hearing your story as well, because so I went into a chemistry program and I knew I did want to go into the food industry. I actually didn't get accepted into the food science program, so I took chemistry as a backup when I was going into my co-op, and I just basically started telling everyone that I knew that I need a co-op position and hopefully I can get one in the food industry. And for my story, instead of it being a distant family member, it was my boyfriend's mother's boss's cousin. Yeah, so I
That's
think,
great.
and like when people, it started with just, we're looking for a summer student, and I did an informational interview with them as well. And I was like, oh, I have a co-op position coming up, like maybe slide my name in there. And I mean, I guess goes to show when you're looking for a job, you'll never know. This is why your network's so important, because it might not be that direct person that you know, but that person's knowing of another person. So
Yeah, 100%. Like, I love that you said that, because you never know who people that know. Like, you might not think, oh, none of my family members work in the food industry, and so obviously I don't have any network. But you don't know who your family members know. Maybe it's going to be someone's hairdresser's kid, or right? And really, all you have to do is just put it out there. Just tell people. And it doesn't have to be forceful. Just through chatting. What are you up to? Oh, I'm hoping to break into the food industry. I'm doing co-op, whatever. But that's exactly how it happened with me too. I was just telling everyone.
yeah.
And stuff comes out of the woodwork. People that you never would have expected will fall into your lap.
It's so true. And so because of that, so you did get this co-op experience. We've had past conversations where you have talked about how you strongly believe in co-op. So I wanted to know why you think that, or what experiences did you get out of your co-op program?
Yeah. I will, I love co-op. I will rep co-op until the day I die. It changed my life. It led me into having direction in my life and understanding what kind of job I wanted. I think it's amazing. And if anyone has a chance to do a co-op program, 100% do it. Obviously, the obvious benefit of co-op is work experience. You can get hired after school, you start to build some of your soft skills, you beef up your resume. That's kind of the straightforward, obvious one, but there's a lot of additional benefits that come out of that rather than just work experience. So one of them is building your network. And we've been saying, your network is so important. So I've had 4 jobs since I started co-op, and 3 of them have come from connections that I've made. So that's a significant portion, right? Like building your network. Networking is such a scary word. And we always think of the classic going to a job fair and hoping you make a connection with someone. It doesn't have to be like that. A lot of times, building a network through people you work with can be really, really beneficial. And co-op is a great way to just kind of get you started on building that network so that when you do graduate, you are ready to go and you have connections. Also, another important thing with co-op is learning how to find jobs. So not every job, jobs aren't posted on job boards anymore. I think the majority of jobs are not. A lot of times they're hired internally or through networks. And in fact, all 3 of my co-op jobs were not posted online. So learning how to find those jobs and different strategies that you can employ to find those hidden jobs that aren't posted online, that's a super important skill. And then kind of going along with that, through co-op, you get a lot of practice in crafting a good resume, writing a good cover letter, and interviewing well, because it's all good if you can find the jobs, but if you can't land the job, you're back at square one. So those skills, that's the biggest part that for me that came out of the co-op courses that I took, the courses I had to take through the co-op program, was learning how to write a resume, write a cover letter, and interview well. Those are really important skills. Another thing about co-op is you get to try out a lot of different types of jobs. And it's equally as important to figure out what you like and what you don't like. You don't want to graduate, think you have one prime job in mind that you love. You get into it and you realize this is not what I want at all, right? So you get different chances to try out different types of jobs within a field, different fields completely, and just have a bit better idea when you finish school what you want to get into. And then a couple bonus things with co-op, which are probably not the reason you're entering a co-op program, but I think are really nice kind of benefits, is you make money. So you can minimize any kind of student debt that you might have. It can be a chance to travel. So if you're interested in traveling or seeing different parts of the country or the globe, it's a really nice way to do that. It's almost like a semester abroad, but you're going to get paid while you do it. And it's a chance to meet new people. And whether that be people that are in your work network or new friends, it's just a great chance to get out there, break out of the routine, and learn a lot about yourself and what you're looking for.
Well, I know from my personal experience, but definitely from hearing you, that co-op all around is pretty positive for an experience, and it seems played a big role in how you've moved through your career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I don't know where I'd be if I didn't take that intro co-op course back in second year. I have no idea. And it just builds from there, right? There's so many good things to co-op. I think I said it before, but anyone who has a chance to do a co-op program, take it.
So because you've done co-op, I know that a lot of students, even when they have co-op positions and they've got that work experience, they've learned how to do their resume, and it comes to time of graduation and they still have that hard time finding a full-time career. Did you personally have any difficulties after you graduated in finding a position?
I did not. I was actually lucky enough to get hired before graduation. But that came out of a co-op position. So I did my very last co-op semester with PepsiCo, and it wasn't with the department I'm in now. It was on the Quaker side of the business. But because I was in the company, I had met people from the Frito-Lay side. They had a position and sort of just worked out. They had a position opening. They knew that I was graduating, and I had I'd had a good experience in my Quaker role. And so they approached me in, I think, January of my last semester, and we're kind of we're looking for someone to fill this position. Here's the job description. Would you be interested? Do you want to come in for an interview? So that's kind of how I was very lucky. But I think I started looking for jobs and, activating my network and looking at job boards and that kind of thing in December. So I was already kind of working on it when that happened. But I was very lucky. I didn't ever have that period of, after graduation and still having trouble.
So it really goes to show even if the co-op experience itself, you might, for example, find out that you don't really like what you're doing. It does pay to have a good attitude and a good work effort, because your name can almost ripple to other areas that you might not even notice.
Yeah, for sure. And that's actually another, you kind of piqued my my brain there. That's another thing, like one thing that's really important with co-op jobs, or even your first job out of school, is it's really hard not to do this, but try not to judge a job by its job description or its title. Like, try not to be picky about that first job. I find in the food industry, I'm not sure about other industries, but definitely in the food industry, every company that I have worked for has really valued anyone with experience. And, you know, you might have experience in the job that you absolutely hate and you never wanted to do, but that is going to play into maybe the job you do want to do. And having that, we were kind of talking about it before with, you know, spec writing, but maybe it's on the floor of a company. That like really foundational baseline experience is so important and can really prepare you for the next job. And so it's really important to not worry too much about your first job and what the job description is. It's getting your foot in the door and getting that experience. That's really the key piece of that.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I definitely know that it's always how you take the information, or how you take what experience you've had in your life and just taking them and being positive about them and using them to apply them somewhere else. Because like you said, in the food industry, I think everything's very interconnected, and I think it's, from what I understand, it's one of those unique industries where if you have experience in QC, it still becomes applicable in, you know, R&D, or it becomes applicable in accounts management. It always relays. And even working in operations, even if you're someone who is working in on the line packaging, that can still translate into another portion of the organization.
For sure. Like, I work with like operations very closely in my job. And I wish I had some of that experience, because like, I feel like that's a knowledge gap. And yeah, like the other part of it too is you never know what you will like. Like, my second co-op job I got in quality, it was in QC. And I was really happy to have a job, but I was a bit apprehensive because I didn't think I wanted to do quality. I was stuck on product development, and I was like, I just don't think I'm going to like this quality job. And I loved it. Like, it surprised me. I absolutely loved the job. It was really interesting. I learned a lot, and I am still considering quality as a potential path I might take in the future as my career evolves. Like, you never know what you're going to enjoy is the other piece of it too.
Yeah, and it sounds like with what you're doing right now, you get to brush in doing those types of roles when someone's off. You were mentioning that you sometimes fill in for other individuals.
Yeah, and I know this is speaking from PepsiCo, but I think it applies to lots of companies, is that broad experience is really valuable in upper kind of leadership or management roles. It's really valued. So getting lots of experience, no matter what it is really important, and you never know where it'll take you.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm going to circle back to this because I want to go back to the role that you're doing right now. And I never actually really asked you is, what do you love about your job? Like, what do you love about doing the thing you're doing?
Yeah, I'm really enjoying my job. It's a really fun job. It's challenging, so it does keep me on my toes. I love working collaboratively with others. I work with lots of different departments. So, you know, the technical packaging experts that I was talking about before, working with finance, working with marketing and operations. And when you work with all those people, you get to see a lot of different perspectives. And it's just really interesting. Like, I really, really enjoy that. I also love learning new things in a field that, you know, I haven't been involved in previously. Like we were talking before about the hands-on learning with packaging. I love that. I'm always learning something new every day, and it's challenging and exciting, and it piques my curiosity, and I love that piece of it. And then also the variety that I was talking about before. Every day is different. Some days I've got lots and lots of meetings and time talking with other people. Some days It's a lot of spec writing. Like it varies, and yeah, it keeps you on your toes, and I really like that.
I can just tell by your voice, you have this like happiness when you like talk about what you're doing, and it's nice to hear someone who genuinely has a love and interest for what they're doing, and I think that always will show in your work.
Yeah, I'm really lucky. I really love my job. And I'm just excited to see, where the future might go. Because yeah, I never saw myself getting into packaging. I never even thought about that, but now I'm in it and I love it. So
that's great. I am going to, though, touch upon, because I know you did mention that there's some challenges that you have in your job. So without going too much, what are some of the challenges that you face in your job?
Yeah. So, okay, time management is one of them. I used to think I was like the master of time management. Like when I was in university, I was like, oh yeah, I've got time management down pat. But work time management is very different. When you're in university, you've got 4 classes a semester. You've got a couple projects for each, and you have to kind of manage those classes for 4 months, maybe 8 months, and then you're done. But at work, like you're juggling a lot. At least for my job, I'm juggling a lot more projects than that. And a lot of times they're much longer deadlines. Like we can be working on things for the end of 2021 right now. So you're juggling a lot of tasks, but they all have different timelines. Your projects are all in a different spot. And so it's like I had to reframe the time management strategies that I use at university to apply to work. And I feel like I'm still getting there. Like I don't always feel like I'm there yet. Sometimes I feel really frazzled just because it is very different. It's like higher volume. But I'm not sitting there and working on a paper for a week straight the way you might do at university. And then I guess another thing is like I still feel like I'm really early on in my job. Like I've been there for a year and a few months now. I started last May, and I'm learning every day and I love it, but I still feel like I'm so green in the job. And it takes, like I'm still building my confidence in my own abilities, and it can be really frustrating because you just want to get to the part where you're good at your job and it comes naturally and you know what to say and you know what to do all the time. And I don't feel like I'm there yet. I mean, I guess the positive spin on that is every time you do something wrong, you learn and you know not to do that again. But yeah, sometimes I'm just like, I just want to be like, I want it to be natural. I want to be there. You know what I mean?
Right. Oh, I definitely know how that feels.
Yeah.
I'm like, I think that all the time when in my program right now, I'm like, well, why can't I do knowledge and think at a high critical level thinking of this research that I've been doing only for 3 months? Like, I should know.
Yeah. We're so impatient. Like we just want to be there. We want to be at the point where we're the expert.
I know,
but it takes time.
It really does, but it's just so exciting because you get so excited about this stuff and you're like, your excitement is outpacing your actual your skills. So you're trying to get there and you're like, I want to know that, but I have to actually sit down and know that.
Yeah. And some things just take time, right? Like there are some things you can't just learn, in a day or by doing it once. And yeah, it's all about patience. And I mean, that's not my strong suit anyways. But yeah, that's kind of a challenge as well.
But I think, it sounds like you are learning. Especially as a student, planning a project that goes all the way till next year, like it's just not something you get a lot of practice with when you're younger, I find. So
exactly. Yeah. So the work world is very different than school. And yeah, you learn as you go, right? And
so we are coming close to the end of up to the time that we have recording. I know this conversation's blown by.
Just flying by.
It's a good conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to finish up with a few more questions, but one of them...
lightning round.
Okay. Well, we'll start with, it might not be as lightning, but why do you think the food industry is a great place to work?
Oof. Yeah. Okay. So I love to eat, and you get to eat when you work in the food industry. So that's a definite perk. That's always the quick answer. But no, in all seriousness, one thing that's nice is food is always going to be there. We are always going to need to eat. And there's so many different jobs within the food industry, whether you're working for a big corporation or like food service or a grocery chain. Like there's so many different types of roles, and we are never not going to need to eat. So there is an element of job security there, knowing that there will always be roles in your field. Yeah, I guess the other part that I love about the food industry, we kind of touched on this before, is the diversity of the people in the food industry. Like there are so many backgrounds. I work with people who have PhDs, and I work with people who have worked their way up from the plant floor to being like a leader in the plant, like a big leader at the plant level. So you get a huge variety of people and perspectives. And kind of going along with that wide variety of experience is really valued at a food company. So as we were saying before, no experience is going to be a waste. That breadth of experience is really important. And then you get to work with people who have that. And it's really interesting. You get to learn a lot from the people you work with.
I think those are pretty good reasons why the food industry is awesome. I mean, I do like eating, but but with that aside, I think it does show from what you've said with your hands-on experience that you might not think, even for someone working on the operations side, that being a packager, just working on the line, or even being a machine operator, that some people could very much view that as a career that could go nowhere, but that's by no means not true. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's nowhere to go but up in the food industry.
Or if you're very happy with what you're doing, I think it's also a place where you can stay in that position if that's something that you're happy with.
Yeah, and there is that security because food is so important. Like,
yeah. And I think if this situation globally has shown anything, I think it has shown how solidly it's needed, no matter how uncertain the world is. That is the one certainty I think people can take is that food is needed.
Yeah.
Just some personal opinion, do you have any books, podcasts, or anything that you would suggest for students to check out? Anything interesting?
Yeah. So I have a couple podcasts that I love. One is called Gastropod, which their catchphrase is that they look at food through the lens of history and science. It's more of a fun listen, but it can really like pique your interest into a certain area or a certain part of research. And if that's kind of the way that you want to go is into research, it's really cool. So that's always a fun listen. Also, My Food Job Rocks is a great look into tons of different careers in the food industry. There's so many episodes of that podcast, and just looks into different jobs and in the food industry, what they're all about, why they're awesome. Yeah, so those are my two. Sorry, what was the other?
Oh, I just had said books, or if there's people they should be following.
Okay, people, this is not specific, but I would recommend, if you've got a company that you're interested, creep their like name on LinkedIn with the title of job that you might want to learn more about, and then connect with those people on LinkedIn. So it's not like a specific like influencer or anything to follow, but like look at what the companies that you're interested in and the types of jobs, and creep those people and send them, a connection note. Just explain, I'm interested in learning more about the food industry, and you can learn a lot from the companies that are really relevant for you by doing that.
See, I can go back. You're already thinking about those informational interviews. I know that's what you're...
I know.
It's okay.
I never turn off.
It's smart though. But your other two suggestions, first of all, Adam is a beast with his podcast, and he just goes, and I highly recommend My Food Job Rocks. I mean, it's amazing how many people he's talked to, and I love Gastropod. They've been doing it. Yeah, I haven't listened to him recently, but I have listened to a big selection of, I mean, their stuff is really good material where you can just like go, like their beginning episodes are so good too. Like it's just the quality all around, no matter
Mhm.
what point. And
Yeah.
I love that.
It's so interesting. Stuff that you wouldn't necessarily know or think about.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
know what? Another thing, sorry, I just cut you off.
No problem.
Another thing is IFT, which is the Institute of Food Technologists. They have like newsletters that you can subscribe to, and they're like quick little snapshots of research briefs or updates about really big companies that come out, like depending on how often you want them. They can be really cool just to stay up to date on the food industry, what's kind of going on, what are big headlines in the food industry. So that's another thing that I would recommend. And you don't have to be a member, you can just subscribe.
Oh, that's interesting because I would have just assumed you had to be a member of IFT for that.
You do not. I've been getting those for like 2 years.
So for anyone that's interested, I'll just link to everything that you just mentioned in the show notes. So yeah, so we'll finish it off with you. In what advice would you give someone who wants to pursue a career similar to yours?
All right. I feel like I've kind of said these, but don't judge a job by its title or description. Every experience is valuable. You never know what you'll like. You never know where it could lead. And getting your foot in the door is really important. So try really hard not to be picky and just get that first experience, whether it be a job, your dream job, or a job you never thought you would consider. And the other one is networking. And we've gone over like informational interviews, coffees with people. Networking can seem intimidating, but you can do it in less intimidating ways. Like we said, just tell everyone that you're interested in working in the food industry, and you will probably find a connection. Add people on LinkedIn and reach out and ask if they'd like to chat about their jobs. Events, like I know they're kind of hard to come by right now, obviously, but if you follow groups like FoodGrads or CIFST, which is the Canadian Institute of Food Science and Technology, they've got events and stuff. And that's also like, if networking events is kind of up your alley, follow big kind of groups like that where you can find those sort of conferences or networking events. Yeah, those are my big two. I know I've said them like 3 times now.
That's okay. We're just gonna drive it into everyone's head
Yeah.
because they're so valuable, and it just goes to show
Mhm.
that you have to keep saying what has worked for you truly, because I can tell that networking and talking to people and your co-op experiences and just taking everything as a stepping stone has been so valuable in your career. So
Yeah, for sure.
we're going to end that there, but because you're very on about networking, if someone did wanted to come in contact with you, do you have any places where someone could follow you or reach out to you?
Yeah, for sure. Just on LinkedIn is awesome. Yeah, my name's Sonya Turvey, so you can just creep me on there and shoot me a message and reach out, and I'd love to chat more if anyone's interested. Yeah.
Who knows, maybe someone else will get an informational interview on.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll finish it for that. So thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. This was a really fun conversation. I know that I've been trying to connect with you for a long time. So it's great that we sat down and had that conversation and be able to share it with others as well.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you everyone so much for taking the time to listen to this podcast. If you are interested to see any of the show notes from this episode, then you can find it under the FoodGrads website on the podcast tab. On that list, you'll find all the different podcast episodes we've already done and any future ones. If you enjoy this episode, then please share it with your friends and network. Not only does it get the word out for this podcast, but it could also give someone direction as to what they want to do in their career. Next week on the show, I interview Sashana Chatou-Edwards, the Quality Assurance Technician at Waterloo Brewing, Ontario's first craft brewer. Sashana is a former FoodGrads campus ambassador and a person who has a personality that just lights up the room when she enters. I'm really excited to share this episode because I learned so much about how agricultural sciences are taught in Jamaica and how Sashana's love for food was cultivated at an early age with her father's farm. So be sure to check out next week's episode because I promise you it's a good one. So once again, thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week.